Council meeting to order. If you'd please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, members present this evening are myself, Mayor Marl, Council members Gearboss, Seibel Koenig, Rhodes, Tahar, and Dillon. From City staff, we have City Manager Campbell, Deputy Clerk Bloom, City Treasurer Bennett, Police Chief Rennick, Parks and Rec Director Scruggs, and Wastewater Treatment Superintendent Skull, as well as our City Engineer Superintendent Gary Rubel. Of course, Councilmember Roth is absent this evening. At this time, I would seek a motion to approve the agenda as amended. The first presentation is actually going to be regarding the Veterans Reception, which just concluded. And then I would like to add one item to the discussion portion of our agenda. It will come after the strategic plan update, and that is our next council meeting, because I have an additional item I would like to see added to the work meeting that's currently beginning at 6:30. So unless there are additional additions, or amendments, the chair would seek a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Rhodes. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Seibel Koenig. All those in favor of approving the agenda as amended signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. And now at this time, the chair would seek a motion to excuse the absence of Councilmember Jim Roth.
So moved.
Moved by Councilwoman Tahar, seconded by Councilman Gearbaugh. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries unanimously. Very good. Thank you all. You know what? I can speak really loud, with a lot of gusto. So let me begin, first of all, by thanking those vets and those members of our community who attended this evening to show their support and appreciation for our veterans. Let me begin this way. If you are a veteran in either a time of war or peace, if you would please rise at this time for a round of applause. Well, we at the City of Saline, and Council in particular, are indebted to you for your service and your contributions to this country, this state, and this community. And we thank you for your time this evening. In just a few moments, Council will be considering a resolution that my office, in conjunction with the City Clerk's office, drafted. And I want to read it to you at this time. And assuming that it will pass, and it will be posted on the bulletin board. But more importantly than being posted, I hope people affirm the values and sentiments that are expressed in this resolution. So I'll begin. Whereas this week will be set aside to honor and thank the men and women who fought to protect our freedoms at home and extend them abroad. And whereas we affirm one of the most fundamental obligations as citizens of this country to demonstrate respect and support for those who sacrifice for peace and freedom by serving in our nation's armed forces. And whereas the City of Saline is honored to pay tribute to the fallen, the missing, the wounded, and the millions who served, and those awaiting to return. And whereas the United States Congress has provided that November the 11th of each year shall be a holiday to honor our veterans. And whereas it is appropriate to commend those individuals who have served and are currently serving in our armed forces, and to support them in all aspects. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Brian D. Marl, Mayor of the City of Saline, on behalf of the citizens of Saline, do hereby proclaim the week of November 11th to be Veterans Appreciation and Recognition Week in the City of Saline. And I call upon all residents of this great community to join me in honoring our American heroes. And again, when this passes, I will set my signature and seal to this document on the 9th day of November 2015. Again, I want to thank all of our vets, those who are present this evening and those who are with us in spirit, for your contributions and for your service. I do want to make one special acknowledgement this evening. Councilmember Gearbaugh's father, who's with us, if I'm not mistaken, sir, you were honorably discharged from the Army 70 years ago?
Yeah.
70 years ago, Mr. Gearbaugh is part of the greatest generation who liberated beaches and freed the skies of Europe and Asia. Let's give him and all of our World War II. Again, thank you to all our vets. There is still some cake, and I hope you'll help yourself if you'd like another piece. Of course, you are welcome to stay for our council meeting. I suspect you may have better things to do with your evening. So we take no offense if you choose to make your exit at this time. Again, thank you for coming, and we appreciate your service. Let's give them all one more round of applause. Thank you. Okay, moving on the agenda this evening is our second presentation. It is an update on 232 Monroe Street, and we are very pleased to have Michael Stolten from Johnson Controls with us this evening. Michael, the floor is yours. And you have a PowerPoint, excuse me.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My name is Michael Stolten. I am the Director of Environmental Affairs for Johnson Controls in North and South America. I'm here to give you an update, as the mayor said, on 232 Monroe Street, just so you guys understand what's going on, what our plans are, and sort of a timeline that you can expect on the redevelopment of the site. Just a little background before we begin. Understand that the 232 Monroe Street site has been an industrial site for over 100 years. Initially, it was a commercial dairy. Later, it was part of a company called Hoover Universal Incorporated. It was actually part of the Universal Die-Cast division. Johnson Controls purchased Hoover Universal in 1985. Hoover Group was created on the eve of that purchase to take over the site at 232 Monroe and to operate that site. And it did so until it went bankrupt and left the site in approximately 1990. In 2003, Johnson Controls was determined to be responsible because as a successor to Hoover Universal, we were the last company standing. And unfortunately, that's the way federal law works. Conditions at the site, as you saw up until this July, were a result of the former owner's activities on that site. The 232 Monroe site was never operated, nor was it owned by Johnson Controls until 2012. And we purchased and took ownership in late 2012. As we prepared for the work that was being done this summer, and the work was primarily related to eliminating the clutter, the debris, and the concrete, asphalt, and so forth that was on the site so that we could do the environmental remediation that needs to be done. We did a sanitary sewer inspection, a video inspection to determine the condition of the sanitary branch that crosses that property. And we found that it was in fair condition. We documented the condition of it so that we could verify that after the work was done this summer, that we didn't do any damage to it. And we've confirmed that, and it's in the same condition it was. The next step was removal of what we call surface debris, unattached surface debris. And that consisted of trees and bushes, a lot of scrap metal piping and other abandoned materials. There were piles of concrete that needed to be removed that had been left, piles of asphalt and various tanks, drums, and other debris. And all of that stuff was pretty much unattached. There were also what we would consider attached debris. The site was used as a metals operation for years, and so there were a lot of presses that were there. Presses typically have pits underneath them, and all of those pits remained at the site and were full of various liquids that had to be disposed of, cleaned out and disposed of first, and then the pits were actually physically removed. There were foundations and building footers the likes of which I've never seen before. There were concrete floors that continued to cover the site, but had been perforated by a previous owner. There were floor pits, piping, storm sewer lines, and any other surface obstacles or subsurface obstacles that we ran into during the excavation activities where we were excavating the footers. We removed those as well. What resulted from that was a site that is free of obstacles so that we can proceed with remediation at the site. As far as the quantity of materials that we removed, it's kind of mind-boggling. We removed and recycled 5,978 tons of concrete. 6,621 tons of concrete were disposed of because they were not fit for recycling. There was too much dirt, there was too much other debris that was mixed into a lot of the concrete piles that remained on the site. 720 tons of asphalt were recycled, and 907 tons of asphalt and debris were disposed of. 3,115 tons of special waste was disposed. Most of this consisted of soils that were contaminated with oil and other materials. 85 tons of hazardous waste was disposed during the operations, and 22,119 gallons of non-hazardous liquid wastes were disposed. Most of that 22,000 gallons came from the pits that were on the site. In all, 12,599 tons of concrete was removed, 1,629 tons of asphalt, 3,320 tons of solid waste, and again, 22,119 gallons of liquid waste. That equates to 35,028,952 pounds of waste that was taken off the site. That happened between mid-July and the end of September. Our next steps, we will be submitting a corrective measures plan near the end of December for EPA's review. After that, once EPA agrees with our corrective measures plan, and there's some negotiation that goes back and forth on that corrective measures plan, we will need to execute that plan. And that will address soil contamination, some river sediments, and it will take place in the next 2 to 3 years. The actual remediation will take place, and that's EPA response dependent, how quickly they get back to us and how quickly we come to a common agreement. And it will be somewhat method dependent on how we do it, which we haven't determined yet. Following remediation, there will be a necessity for some site monitoring, and what that is to be determined. We will need to confirm the corrective measures were successful, that we have taken care of any remediation, taken care of any contamination that remains on the site. We will have to prepare a site closure document, and the timing of that and response to it will be dependent upon EPA's response and confirmation. And then we will proceed with redevelopment of the site. Future vision, we are committed to performing whatever remediation is necessary per the state and federal requirements. We have not yet determined the final use. We do know that it will not be residential property, and Johnson Controls will ensure that the property is used in a beneficial manner for the city and the residents of Saline, and that it will be safe for you to do that. Any questions?
Are there any questions for our guest? Mayor Pro Tem Rhodes.
Yes, just two questions. One is, how do you anticipate cleaning up the river sediments? And secondly, do you have any idea about how much it has cost Johnson Controls to date for the work they've done there?
So let me address those individually, because they're two separate questions. The river sediments will be addressed through dredging of the river. And we will have to obtain a permit from the Surface Water Division of the DNR to do so. We've done this before in other rivers. We can do it safely without any issues. It's really a minimal amount of sediment that needs to be dredged from the river, but it is part of the necessary plan.
Is that a mechanical dredging or a vacuum dredging?
We haven't determined the actual process for the dredging. It could be either. In the conditions that I've seen in the river's pretty rocky, and so vacuum-type dredging might be easier.
Yeah, seemed like
but-
it would be easier and
But
safer.
a lot of times, we allow the dredging contractor to choose the best method, because they know the dredging better than we do. And so we'll give them a performance type contract that says, here's what you have to perform. You decide the best way to do it. Second question, yes, I know how much it cost. I'm not prepared to talk about that.
Okay,
It's expensive.
it's a fair amount of money, I'm sure.
Anything further, Mayor Pro Tem?
That's it, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Gearbaugh.
For right now, what will be put on the plain dirt that's there now? Is it going to be seeded or?
So right now, we're maintaining the current stormwater permit on the site, which means we have to do a weekly inspection, and that there are silt curtains that are there right now
Okay.
that are preventing any kind of siltation to the river. We can maintain that as long as we continue with the weekly inspections and maintain the silt fences, and that's our intention to do it. We looked at seeding it this year, but it was going to cost about $60,000 to seed it, and we felt that we could use $60,000 in a better manner on the site, because eventually, if you've looked at the site at all, there's some really huge piles of dirt that are up next to the river that are currently well vegetated. Those are going to be spread over the site eventually.
Got it.
And so any seeding or grass or anything that we put on the site at this time is eventually going to be covered up.
So they'll use the same soil there and not bring new soil into Cabot?
Well, all of that soil that's in the piles by the river was brought in by a former owner.
Okay.
So it is clean material.
Got it. Thank you.
Anything further, Mr. Gearbaugh?
Nope.
Additional questions? Ms. Tahar?
Yes, thank you. So I have received comments from a couple of citizens who have been in the area and who are concerned that they've detected some odors in the area that seem like chemical odors, sometimes fairly strong by the description. So I and a couple of family members took a walk over there yesterday, and it was a rather windy day, but there were moments when there was clearly an odor in the area that seemed like an insecticide kind of smell, one of the family members described it as. And another person who has experience with this said that it reminded him of the odor that came from chemicals used in the plating process. So you mentioned a little bit about monitoring on a weekly basis. Are odors being monitored? Is there anything you can tell us that we can explain this, explain
So-
what citizens might be noticing?
There was a few different things that happened. Again, we don't know everything that happened on the site because we never operated it. But we do know that there are some chlorinated solvents on the site that are odoriferous. Okay? And we have attempted to not disturb those materials to the best of our ability. You will not encounter any kind of odors or anything that are dangerous to anyone. Okay? I was out on the site several times over the summer when the activities were going on. The only smell that I was able to differentiate was a diesel smell. And at the time I was there, there was diesel equipment operating. And so, and the wind was blowing from the equipment towards me, and that's all I could discern. We do not have an ongoing odor monitoring program, if you will. But I'm certain that there's no risk to anyone. And we did, as part of the investigative work that we did, we've done what's called a soil gas survey to verify that none of the surrounding homes or other buildings would be at risk for any sort of indoor air issues, and those were all non-detect.
Okay. Just to help me understand, can you explain a little bit more about the material you left undisturbed and what's important about not disturbing it?
Well, quite simply, the more we disturb it, the more it's going to be up in the air, and the more it could be available for you to smell, for the citizenry to smell. The reason we left it that way is because that is one of the targets of our remediation work that we're going to undertake when we have an opportunity based on EPA's response to our corrective measures plan.
Can I have one more? Okay, so, thank you. And to follow up, so in the period between now and when remediation starts, are there concerns about rain and water and possible leaching of
No.
things in the?
No, and the reason I say no is because those materials, because of the activities of the former owners in perforating and removing a lot of the concrete flooring, there was rainwater percolation through those materials and has been since roughly 2004 or thereabouts. So anything that was going to happen has already happened, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions? Well, Mr. Stolten, let me say this. When City Manager Campbell and I requested a meeting with you, I believe this past spring, if I recall correctly, you made, I think I began the meeting by being pretty emphatic. Hopefully I was also respectful when I said that the remediation and cleanup of that site was in the community's interest. It's a quality of life issue. And subsequent to that, you made a number of commitments, and I have to applaud you, sir, because I found you, and I find you now, to be very direct and very forthcoming. You made promises and you kept those promises, and we appreciate that. And although much work remains undone, we have made significant progress. And so I want to thank you for being here. I also want to reiterate that when Johnson Controls submits a revised corrective measure plan, as long as you are still comfortable with this approach, I'll be calling on my colleagues to again pass a resolution calling on the EPA and our federal elected officials to encourage the EPA to move expeditiously, albeit thoroughly, to approve that plan so we can begin the next phase of this remediation.
I have no problem with that.
Excellent. Okay. Well, please keep us in the loop and let us know what we can do to be helpful.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Mr. Stolten, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I'll raise the screen. Oh, I'm sorry. Be keeping the presentation down for the Eagle? I'm sorry. Okay. Well, moving on the agenda then. We come to citizen comments on agenda items. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested, but not required, to state his or her name and address for the record.
Mary Hess, and it's regarding the payment from Tetra Tech on, for the wastewater treatment plant, otherwise known as a sewer plant. It has been a stench, to say the least, on Canterbury and probably half of town. The smell is atrocious. And Tetra Tech said, of course, they were not hired to find out what the smell is. Maybe part of the study should have a stench study. Our septic tanks, I don't know what was going on, but it's unbelievable. There were people that made comments on the Saline Post, and one lady said that she had not, in fact, they had looked at a home in the area, and because of the problem, had chose not to purchase. It is getting to the point to where it's going to problematically as far as the selling of homes. It has been a bad year as far as the smell. And I think the taxpayers, before we start doing townships, can you get a study on what the problem is and that it's improving instead of getting worse? It really makes people ill. Thank you.
There are additional citizen comments? Please.
Good evening, Jim Peters, 509 Springbrook. I'm here tonight to ask for council support for agenda item 15207 under new business. That's a memorandum of understanding for the Saline Preserve and Wildlife Sanctuary. This memorandum is a collaborative effort between 4 communities: City of Saline, City of Milan, York Township, and Saline Township. And we have a common goal, and that goal is to convert the former Charlesburg property that's 15 acres just south of the DNR Fishery Research Station into a wildlife sanctuary and preserve. It's a beautiful piece of property that's relatively untouched. It'll make a beautiful addition to the community. The piece of property is bordered by the Saline River and the Springbrook Creek. I have pictures here and maps if anybody cares to see these later on tonight. The preserve will be managed by a 501c3 Friends of the Saline River at no cost to taxpayers in Saline. We need to raise about $108,000. Washtenaw Parks and Rec has pledged $50,000 already. We also have pledges from Washtenaw Land Conservancy, and Mr. Rhodes, Councilman Rhodes, has been kind enough to purchase a property and hold it until we get this project rolling. But getting the memorandum of understanding approved by the 4 communities is key to moving forward on the process of this project. So this is a really nice piece of property. It will benefit all the communities involved and generations to come. Someday we'd like to connect Curtis Park with Salt Springs Park, Wilderness Park, and the new Saline Preserve River Wildlife Sanctuary. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have later on. And again, I have pictures and maps, and your support is really appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Additional citizen comments on agenda items? No, then we'll move on to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for council discussion. Is there a motion?
Move to approve as submitted.
Thank you, Mr. Hard. You care to be the second on that, Mayor Pro Tem? Thank you. It's been moved by Councilwoman Tahar, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Rhodes to approve as submitted. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. Moving on to new business, item 15-205. This is Eagle Scout presentation, Anthony Randazzo. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the October 26, 2015 memo from Parks and Rec Director Scruggs and to approve or not to approve the Eagle Scout request to create an, help me with this word, orienteering, good word, course for Mill Pond Park. Is there a motion?
Move to acknowledge receipt and to approve.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Rhodes. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Gearbaugh. We have a guest. Thank you for being here tonight. And Ms. Scruggs, can I hand it over to you first?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Council. I'm here to introduce Anthony Randazzo. He has presented his Eagle Scout project to the Park Commission last month, and he's going to explain what orienteering is, but his proposal is to put an orienteering course in Mill Pond Park. You might recall we currently have one in Curtis Park that one of our Eagle Scouts put in, I think, two years ago, or maybe even 3 years ago. So I'll turn it over to Anthony for his presentation.
Hello everyone, I'm Anthony Randazzo from Troop 429, and I want to thank you for your time so I could show you my project for an orienteering course at Mill Pond Park. Firstly, I want to tell you guys what is Boy Scouts. I'm sure most of you know what Boy Scouts is, but just in case you don't, I'd like to explain. Boy Scouts is an organization for boys throughout America and even throughout the world. Boy Scouts' main objective is to benefit Scouts with skills that they will use throughout their lifetime. They teach Scouts about how we should help others, not only the less fortunate, but for anyone who needs help. They help Scouts understand what ethical and moral decisions are and their importance in our lives. And with all that they teach and let us experience, they are preparing us for our future. My life as a Scout and why I want to be an Eagle Scout. I've been involved in Boy Scouts for as long as I can remember. It's always been a part of my everyday life. I've attended several campouts while in Boy Scouts, helped friends and fellow Boy Scouts in their path to Eagle, and cleaned the roadside of Michigan Ave several times with MDOT. I hope to become an Eagle Scout, which is the highest rank in Boy Scouts, so I can become a part of a distinguished group of men and a group of men who aren't afraid to get things done just like me. Now, what is an Eagle Scout service project? Well, just like in its name, it's a requirement you must do to obtain the rank of Eagle. It's where a Life Scout, such as I, must plan a service project, develop and lead others in its construction, and it must benefit an organization outside of Boy Scouts, such as any religious institution, any school, or community. Now, this is where an Eagle Scout. Now, this is what an Eagle Scout. Oh, I'm sorry, I read the wrong. This is my project proposal. Well, my project is to install an orienteering course at Mill Pond Park. It's easy to understand and educational for anyone who wants to explore the park. I chose Mill Pond Park because I've lived near there my entire life, and I have many good memories down there, and because it's a very big park and has lots of places to explore. Now, what is an orienteering course? Well, for those who don't know, orienteering is when you have to find certain destinations using a simple method of using a compass and directions. An orienteering course is composed of a start point, a series of checkpoints, and a finish point. Each checkpoint from start to finish has a compass direction to the next checkpoint and a distance to the next checkpoint. Benefits. Here are some simple benefits that the course will have for the community. It will bring more life into the park, expanding the park's usage. Using an orienteering course that is at least over a mile long is a requirement for all Scouts, which will help them in their path for Eagle, just like me. It is also educational, teaching anyone who wants to participate a skill on how to navigate their way through using a compass, and it's also another fun thing to do at the park. All right, how I plan to do it. So now things are getting into the labor part of my project. This here is a brief description of the steps I will take on the construction part of my project. In the first day of construction, I will find the locations that I have marked on the map for the checkpoints. Then I will hammer in the ground wood stakes to mark where the pavers should go. Then when the volunteers show up, we will gather all of our materials, supplies, and tools, and then we will start installing the checkpoints one by one. Once the construction is all over, I will create and provide flyers for the orienteering course and bring them to the rec center to leave them there for people to learn how to use the course and where to get a compass. Locations. These are all the spots where I will have places for the checkpoints. There's 13 checkpoints from start to finish and 2 points for a 100-foot pace measurement. Like I said before, the course is over a mile long and will end in the path going to Curtis Park. The reason I chose this path is because I don't see many people walk down the river, and people should explore it more. And if you don't understand, the number 1, the first white pinpoint, that's where it starts, and it ends on number 13. And then the blue is number 1, that's the 100-foot pace. How will it look? The checkpoints will be 12 by 12 inch square stone pavers, just like the one on the far left. The paver is heavy and durable and meant to last a long time. I want the checkpoints to be flush with the ground for easy maintenance, using the same method that is used in cemeteries to install flat gravestones, which is to cut the grass out so you have a square hole, pour cement, and lay the paver, adding a little pressure to make the paver stuck, just like the photo in the middle. Thence, when it is solid, it will be covered back up, and it will look like this sample on the far right, but I'll add some slag sand around so the grass doesn't grow over it. Materials contributing to cost. So these are all the items that we will have to get fundraised and hope to get donated. Simple enough, the items that will be fundraised will be the stone pavers, slag sand, pea gravel, sandblasting Texon pavers, cement, and graffiti-proof coating. and hope to get donated refreshments mostly. Water to stay hydrated, and time from the volunteers, and tools from the volunteers that they will hopefully lend to us. Finally, when I plan to do it. These are all the meetings and appointments I have to get approved so I can follow through my project. So far, I've met with Mrs. Scruggs, and I got the approval to schedule the meeting with the Parks Commission, which I also got approval to proceed to hear. And if all goes well, I will schedule an appointment with the BSA Council, or I did schedule an appointment with the BSA Council tomorrow, November 10th. And if all goes well there, my construction will be from the 21st to 22nd. And that's it. Does anybody have any questions?
Very good. We appreciate your time and your presentations. Are there any questions for our guest? You were pretty thorough. We appreciate that. Okay. Ms. Scruggs, you could, oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Dillon.
I just wanted to know, is DPW going to supervise or check these to make sure that they're level and they're not going to be an issue when it's mowing?
I will be checking in on the progress of the...
Okay.
Additional questions? Mr. Randazzo, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Okay, we have a motion on the full floor, moved by Rhodes, seconded by Gearbaugh. Is there any discussion? No discussion, then we'll proceed to vote. It's been properly moved to acknowledge receipt, of course, and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you again. Thank you. We move on to new business item 15-206, resolution in support of the ban of the use of microbeads. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from Connie DeHaan, Recording Secretary for the Environmental Commission, and to approve or not to approve the resolution in support of the ongoing efforts of the state legislation. I think it should be state legislature, shouldn't it? To ban the use of microbeads and to send the resolution to the state legislature. Sorry for the typos.
Move to acknowledge receipt and approve.
Thank you, Councilwoman Tahar. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Gearbaugh. Would anyone care to comment? Mr. Rhodes is this council liaison to the Environmental Commission, and also Bruce Westlake, the chair of the Environmental Commission, are here. We'd welcome your comments.
Bruce, would you like to?
Bruce Westlake, Chair of the Environmental Commission. Just wanted to clear up a couple things that people might be confused about. When they look on the ingredients in products, they may be looking for things that don't say microbeads or plastic microbeads. They'll actually show up as polyethylene or polypropylene, and you can find those in your ingredients. Generally, the products that we're targeting are products that have scrub. They may be facial scrubs. Sometimes there's toothpaste. And this is relatively new to the legislature. We're just finding that these microbeads are making it into the Great Lakes. It's been known that they have traveled into the oceans, but this is relatively new information. Any questions from anybody?
Any questions from council members? Mr. Rhodes, would you care to make any additional comments?
I'd just like to say that even though some of the manufacturers have begun to change out their formulation to remove these plastic microbeads and substitute other things, there's still other manufacturers who have not moved in that direction, and we on the Environmental Commission wanted to encourage our state legislators to continue to move forward on this banning of them.
Very good. Any questions for Councilmember Rhodes or Mayor Pro Tem Rhodes or Mr. Westlake, the chair of the Environmental Commission? Mr. Gearbaugh?
Just a statement, I highly support this because I know Illinois has been pushing on this big time.
Yes.
And because their concerns are already showing up in fish and such, and the dangers that it's going to make to wildlife. So yeah, even the smallest thing can cause a major problem.
Yes. It travels all the way through our wildlife and has been shown to go go into the fish and then travel on to birds or animals, so, and which of course makes it to the human food chain too, so.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time tonight. Any additional discussion? Thank you both for your work on this, and please extend our thanks to the Environmental Commission as well. It's been properly moved by Tahar, seconded by Gearbaugh to acknowledge receipt and to approve, noting, of course, that the word legislation, which appears twice in the last line, has been changed to legislature. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 15-207. This is Memorandum of Understanding, Saline Preserve at 9,000 South Maple Road. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the October 26, 2015 memo from City Attorney Nick Curcio and to approve or not to approve the Memorandum of Understanding that provides for the establishment of a river preserve and wildlife sanctuary on a property in York Township at 9,000 South Maple Road in conjunction with York Charter Township, Saline Township, and the City of Milan. Is there a motion?
Move to acknowledge and approve.
Thank you, Councilwoman Seibel Koenig. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Dillon. Well, Mayor Pro Tem Rhodes.
Yeah, Mayor Merrill, as was previously stated, I'm the current owner of this property, and so it's probably best to eliminate any potential conflict of interest possibilities. I'm going to remove myself from the room during the discussion and the voting.
Very good.
And then come back afterwards.
Maybe I can designate former Councilmember Peters to retrieve Mr. Rhodes when we move on to the next agenda item. Thank you for acknowledging that, Mayor Pro Tem. Well, let me begin by saying this, and I'm happy to address any questions or concerns that there may be. I want to acknowledge, of course, Mayor Pro Tem Rhodes' leadership on this issue, as well as that of former Councilmember Peters, and also my friend and colleague, John Stanowski, who is the supervisor of York Township, who's been really instrumental in this. Also, Dickinson Wright has provided a lot of guidance and support, both Nick Curcio and Scott Smith. I think this is a really important development and ultimately very beneficial to the county to have a preserve, to create a mechanism by which this community can request and petition for grants. And as Mr. Peters indicated, one of the ultimate goals is to clear the river between Saline and Milan and open that up for canoeing and kayaking, which I think would be absolutely wonderful. I also think this is important because if this is approved, this is an impetus this will be an impetus for the Washtenaw County Parks and Rec Department to begin investing dollars in Saline. And for far too long, our tax dollars have gone to other communities, and we have not reaped all the dollars that we send to that department that does really vital work. So I'm really excited by this. I thank all the players, everyone who helped bring this to fruition, and I enthusiastically support acknowledging receipt and the approval. Like I said, if I can, I'm happy to address any questions or concerns you may have. Mr. Peters may also be able to address some questions and concerns you may have. No? Okay, Mr. Gearbaugh?
I think just for clarification, perhaps the city manager may want to address just the issue about the city's responsibility and, of course, recommendations by our legal team.
Specific to?
Specific to that we don't have any ownership in this property or the liability for it and so forth.
Correct. As I understand it, the mechanism in place would be is supported by the potential partnering jurisdictions, City of Saline, Saline Township, York Township, City of Milan, and they would have representation on a potential of a not-for-profit. I think Mr. Peters mentioned that in his remarks earlier to support this. But this, and then it even states that there is no obligation for the city or any of the jurisdictions to support any kind of support financially or otherwise. So I think certainly our city attorney redrafted the MOU before you, and so staff is comfortable in recommending moving forward.
Additional questions? Additional comments? Mr. Gearbox, please.
Just comment, I think this is a welcoming addition to what we consider part of our parks and recreation here. And I agree, we need to take the benefit of what the county should be providing to us in terms of our tax dollars that we turn over to them. This is part of the way, and if it will help trigger additional new financing and different other things that we can have potentially for non-motorized paths or whatever else, I think this is a great initiative to it. And at this point, it doesn't cost us anything, technically.
Thank you, Mr. Gearbox. Additional comments? Ms. Tahar?
Yeah, I was going to say essentially what Mr. Gearbach has already said. And I think this is a great project. It fits really well with the rest of our own park system. It's a great addition. It's a beautiful piece of property, and I will heartily support it.
Excellent. Anything further? No, then we'll proceed to vote. It's been properly moved by Cybo Koenig, seconded by Dillon, to acknowledge receipt and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. And of course, the clerk will please note the abstention from Mr. Rhodes as well as Mr. Roth's absence. If you would please, Mr. Peters, retrieve Mayor Pro Tem Rhodes.
In the event that you were curious, it did pass.
Thank you all.
We move on now to our final new business item of the evening, which is 14-134. This is pay application number 2 for wastewater treatment improvements. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the October 20th, 2015 memo from Tetra Tech and to approve or not to approve the contractor's application for payment number 2 for the wastewater treatment plant improvements in the amount of $114,217.20. Is there a motion?
I'll move to acknowledge receipt and to approve.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gearbaugh. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Rhodes. We have both our city engineer, Mr. Rubel, as well as our wastewater treatment superintendent, Mr. Skull, here. Gentlemen, do you care to make any comment at this time? Okay. Are there questions from the dais? Mr. Gearbaugh?
Of course, it's the same question we've always asked, the issue with the odor. And I do know we did some removal of sludge and so forth at some point, I think.
We
so-
did, and hopefully the project doesn't have a whole lot of money put away for odor abatement. It does have some elements of odor abatement, dealing with the sludge tanks and the septic receiving holding tanks. Hopefully the improvement we'll get is through a better process control. We have a lot of aging equipment that's not in the best working order, and hopefully with that improved, we'll get a handle on the odor. In addition, this, nothing to do with the project, but over the winter, we plan on taking down both odor scrubbers and doing inspection inside, internally, which we can't do when they're running, obviously. And hopefully we'll find some way of making some improvements with the existing equipment.
Yeah, I'm hoping for that, because what seems confusing to me is that we had really addressed the problem for quite a long while until we started doing construction in the last year and a half or so. And so, and you may have a different opinion, but it hadn't been that bad. And I'm trying to figure out, hopefully that as these projects progress and the phases are finished up and you do your thing, that we are addressing it until we have to do something else.
Yeah, well, please keep in mind that the first phase left us with a lot of untreated sludge that was stored for almost a year underground in our tanks, which also affected the plant because we couldn't operate as normal. That was removed in time for the new phase to start. So nothing's been normal for the last year or so.
And that's what I just want to communicate, that's clearly what has been the problem that's contributed to it.
Yes.
Let me, if I may, Mr. Gearbaugh, to finish. I want to follow up on his comments, Bob. And I've made this, I think, exact comment from this dais on a number of occasions, which is we're essentially in the middle of a substantial rehab modernization program of our wastewater treatment plant. And so while it is inconvenient and burdensome, there are going to be issues. I am hopeful, as I think you are, that once the projects are completed, we will notice a difference and there will be an improvement. However, I do suspect that if some of the odor issues continue to linger and persist, there's probably broad consensus from this council and from staff to investigate alternative means to mitigate that.
Great.
The other thing that I would add, and I want to preface by saying this is in no way meant to be disrespectful or dismissive. But when people experience odor problems, as opposed to posting things on Facebook or talking amongst ourselves, I think it would be helpful if they called your plant, your colleagues directly. If it's after
Definitely.
hours, I've offered for people to call me. And I'll reiterate one more time for the record, my cell phone's on my hip, generally 24/7. The number is 734-272-3654. You're welcome to call me at any hour of the day if there are issues. And I should remind the citizens that last winter, when there was an issue on a Friday night, it was my friend, the owner and president of Quantum Signal, who texted me at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, which resulted on Boots being on the ground assessing the situation within an hour, I believe. So again, it's very helpful if people communicate those issues directly to staff so that they can make adjustments and monitor the situation. The other thing that I would ask on that front, Bob, because I think this data would be valuable, is if between now and January, and I think you already do this, if you're logging that information so we can determine how many complaints we are in fact receiving.
Yes, sir.
I think that would be valuable. The other thing that I've offered in the past, and I continue to offer to this day, and I'll offer this until the project is completed, if anybody wants to sit down with me to discuss the magnitude of what we're doing at the plant and how important it is, I'm happy and more than happy to accommodate anybody if they want to discuss that. Anything further on this issue? Of course, I support the payment of $114,000. Not trying to be too verbose. If there's nothing further then, it's been properly moved by Gearboss, seconded by Rhodes, to acknowledge receipt and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to the discussion portion of our agenda, commission, committee, and task force reports from council members. Mayor Pro Tem Rhodes.
I have two commission reports to give. The first is for Parks. At our last meeting, besides reviewing the Eagle Scout project that was approved this evening, we also began to look at our 5-year plan for recreation and parks and begin the updating process. We established the parks that would be receiving the cleanup in 2016, the spring of 2016, and that will be Marlboro and Canterbury Parks. And the Gaga Pit, which was previously approved as an Explorer or an Eagle Scout project down at Mill Pond Park, is substantially complete. There are a few items that need to be finished on it yet, but youth are actually using it in its semi-finished state. And then on the Environmental Commission, we reviewed the public service announcements that we have generated so far, and that continue to be at play on Channel 18 from time to time, and talked about a couple more that are underway. We also had a good discussion on the microbead ban, which was also approved this evening. And then we talked about the storm drain system within the city and the contaminants that get down into those drains, including the leaves this time of the year. And talked about the fact that we need to publicize to the community that whatever goes into those storm drains does not go through any kind of a cleanup filtration system. Those drains, as they join together, eventually dump straight into the Saline River. And so we need to be very conscious of what goes into those storm drains. And we're going to continue that discussion and come up with some educational plans and ways to get that information across. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Cybalcani, did you have a report or announcement?
I do, from
Please.
the Arts and Culture Committee, who met today, and we had an update on the installation of the Little Free Libraries. The Arts and Culture Committee has worked with the Parks and Rec Department, the Saline Schools, and the 212 Art Center to provide, decorate, and install 6 Little Free Libraries adjacent to the parks around the town. If you're not familiar with the Little Free Library concept, they are basically weatherproof boxes located in areas where people and pedestrians walk by, and they are filled with books. And they operate on the premise of take one, leave one, if you can, and it is completely free. And the boxes generally have a variety of children's books and adult books.
Very good. Thank you, ma'am. Additional committee, commission, or task force reports?
Mayor?
Oh, please, I'm sorry, Mr. Gearbox.
Even though HDC and Planning have not officially met in a couple of months, Planning Commission did have their master plan meeting out at the Liberty School about 2 weeks ago. We had a good turnout of individuals from the city and members. I would like to have more input, and I believe we have that opportunity still on our website for individuals to contribute and basically give their ideas of what they'd like to see Saline be in the next 10, 15 years. We were talked about non-motorized paths, transportation, potential use, land use development, recreation, and those type of things. So if anyone's out there, please, we need that kind of input because this is something that we put in place to basically request for grants or even just to plan ourselves for the next 5 years, 5 to 10 years. And the other thing at HDC, the new outhouse is pretty much almost done and completed. It's behind the livery stable at the depot. So I encourage people to take a look when they get a chance. It's something that
To be clear, though, it's not a
it's not functioning, but it is there as another great scout project that is being accomplished.
Excellent. Any other commission, committee, or task force reports? Just very brief, and of course, Chief Deputy Clerk Bloom or City Manager Campbell or Councilwoman Tar can chime in, but the Oakwood Cemetery Task Force met on the 29th. We're going to meet again, I think, at the end of the month to review a few additional items, and then we will probably have a number of recommendations for council to review, hopefully at either our first or second meeting in December. So please, please look forward to that. If there are no additional committee reports, how about reports or other announcements? Ms. Seibel-Koenig.
A report from the Saline Area Chamber of Commerce. We are in our busiest season, which is the holiday season. We have a lot of activity coming up. Some of the things on our plate right now, we have just developed a coloring contest for grades kindergarten through third grade and distributed a form to all of the elementary schools in which if you submit your form, you can be entered into a drawing to win the privilege of riding with Santa in the Christmas parade. And those entries are being accepted, I think, until the 20th. On December 1st, we have our tree lighting ceremony, and that's where we will draw the winner for the Ride with Santa in the parade. The parade is Saturday, December 5th at 5:30 p.m. downtown. We hope that everybody will come out for that.
Excellent. Thank you, Councilwoman. Additional announcements? No, then we'll move on to the third discussion item, American Cell Tower. Mr. Campbell, do you want to handle this one, sir?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some of you may recall, in a few years past, this is about our third time where we've had offers from various companies to purchase the lease on the tower over on 600 Maple. So that's been there for quite some time, where the city actually continues to own the property, but we lease it to American Tower. And the last couple proposals to extend the lease was for significant years, 30-plus years, I believe. And at the time, the city council's direction to staff was, we want to maintain status quo, which is the current expiration is 2026. So as you can see from the letter that was provided, there, instead of the 30-year plus renewal or extension, they're proposing something shorter, a 15-year, 3 5-year extensions, which would allow them, their reasoning is that if they can have a little bit longer term than currently would expire in 2026, another 10 years, they could attract at least one or more additional tenants, which would then impact in a positive way, the amount of money that the city gets per the lease. And then, as you can see, a one-time payment, incentive payment to the city, if they were to consider and approve this, of $15,000. So, wanted to, again, bring that before council, see if there's any interest at all, one way or the other.
Let's start. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Campbell regarding his report, his verbal report, or the letter that was provided in your packet? No? All right, let's start then at the end of the dais. I don't mean to put you on the spot, Ms. Seibel-Koenig. Any thoughts on this?
I can sort of see their point about using the longevity of their site as leverage in contract negotiations. Not too sure otherwise.
Okay. Mr. Gearbaugh?
Yeah, what was if you remember, Mr. Campbell, the amount of payment they were going to give us for a 30-year extension? Wasn't it like 45,000?
40 or 50, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, part of our issue was we were concerned about the intent of what could happen with technology in 10 years from now. So I'm kind of okay with leaving it as is.
Okay. Mr. Rhodes?
I agree with Councilmember Gerbaugh.
Okay. Mr. Hart?
I don't feel I know enough to say we should definitely jump on this. I wondered if staff had any recommendations, but I'm comfortable with the status quo.
Ms. Dillon?
I'm fine with where it's at, based on the information I have.
I concur. I don't think there's any additional information that I could be provided that would make me change my mind. My position mirrors that of Councilmember Gearboss. Feel like you have consensus? I do. Okay. Then moving on to council pending items list. This is just sort of an FYI. Obviously, many of these issues are ongoing. Some of them are coming up in the very near future, including the codification of city ordinances, Oakwood Cemetery change. Of course, the sidewalk repair has essentially been not totally completed, but that one's basically done. Of course, street funding we discussed this evening. So, just an FYI for your records. Mr. Campbell, do you want to end with the strategic, just a brief update on the strategic vision?
Sure. We'll try and make this quick, and just that, of course, the color coding, to try and help determine as we go through, I don't even know what color that is, but the yellowish, dark yellow. But objective 3, improve access to our downtown/center of community, improve access to city, year 1 task. Of course, as Mr. Gearbach mentioned, the Land Use and Recreation Community Engagement Meeting was conducted by Carla Wortman back in late October. And then that's on page 2. Page 4, Goal 3, infrastructure, specific objective 5, non-motorized project plan. It's the same. That you may recall there are a couple items that are duplicated along in the plan, throughout the plan. And then also plan utilities, urban development, 1-year tasks, continue to explore feasibility and appropriateness of PA 425 agreement with Saline Township. And it's been ongoing for for a little bit of time anyway, that since the utility, you may recall that Tetra Tech did in fact conduct the utility studies that had been requested and paid for by Saline Ventures, the developer, and staff is waiting for a response or proposal from Saline Ventures. Page 5, objective 7 of that same goal 3, maintain city historic sites, the certified local government grant, the CLG grant, to reapply. So we did, staff is completed and signed, and returned the documents to the National Park Services to move that forward. You may recall that we were waiting for the Park Service to officially approve and sign our paperwork. So we've just recently, in the last, I think it was last week maybe, that we signed off and sent that in, so hopefully we can move forward with that here soon. Goal 4, finances/economic development, objective 1, specific to objective 2, encourage business development. This fall, late summer, early fall, conducted Small Business Summit, Large Employer Summit, and West Side Business Summit, continuing to partner with Saline Main Street and Chamber of Commerce. Objective 3, expand housing stock. First 4 building permits are being processed for Cypress Ridge currently. And objective 4, provide top-notch services and infrastructure. Talking about educate citizens regarding the improvements to US 12. Staff is continuing to present to local groups such as CQC, Rotary, and the Small Business Summit. I believe that is it.
Any questions for Mr. Campbell?
No, we appreciate your update. Thank you, sir. The last item, my friends, is to see if you are all amenable to adjusting the start time of our work meeting at our next council meeting, which will be a week from today, the 16th. I've been notified by Councilmember Rhodes as well as City Manager Campbell that we are close to having a proposed agreement on the sale of our Monroe Street property with Damian Farrell. As most of you recall, we designated, in addition to staff, Mayor Pro Tem Rhodes and Councilmember Gearbaugh to work on that. We appreciate your efforts, gentlemen, and I would like to have that as a discussion item beginning at 6 on the 16th. I suspect that'll take maybe a half hour, 45 minutes, and then we can transition to employee health care. I will tell you, because I'm eager to move on this issue, if there is broad consensus on the sale of that property, I personally believe it should be added as an action item on that on the regular agenda for the meeting on the 16th. But my question is everyone comfortable with meeting at 6 to discuss that?
I am.
Good?
Yes.
Good? Mr. Har, Ms. Dillon? Okay, excellent. And I will note that although our city manager will not be here, staff will be, as well as our chief legal counsel, Mr. Smith. And then please note we have work meetings on the 7th as well, and then we give you one meeting off for the holidays.
Nice of you. Thank you.
We'll be back at it in January, of course. So if there's nothing further, Mayor Clerk will make the change then that we'll meet at 6. Yeah,
Question.
next week.
Are we going to have a retreat like we've done in the past, or?
Actually, if you indulge me, Mr. Gearby, I'd like to give an update on that at one of our next meetings.
Okay.
I'd like to propose something of a change and do it actually after the first of the year as opposed to during the holidays.
That's fine.
And possibly engage a new vendor as well. Okay?
Okay, we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I can give you, I'll provide a more thorough update, Mr. Gearby, if not at our next meeting, then the first one in December. Okay? So if there are no additional discussion items, we'll move on to public comments. Under the Open Meetings Act, any citizen may come forward at this time and make comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record.
Mary Hess, I appreciate your voiced concern over the smell. I do want to say that years ago, while I was on council, Abe Mumfa with Ayers, Lewis, Norris and May, our engineering firm, had really discouraged and tried to get the city to not take sludge from septic tanks, that the plant is not built for this type of heavy effluent. A gallon of sludge from a septic tank is over 200% stronger than a gallon of household effluent. So while we're bonding $2 million, $3 million to fix something, but we're making money from sludge, are we really? The gentleman just said, we held sludge for a year? This is crap. And the people we're talking about, maybe, well, in a couple of years, it'll be, we've been doing this. The sludge is the problem. And I don't care, I know the city makes money off it. At whose cost? And my water and your water and sewer bill went up, I think, twice in the last 3 years. Has the sludge company, has their costs went up? I don't think it's went up for about 3 years. Let's charge them triple. And if they want to dump here so much, let them pay, like we're paying to try and fix our plant. And as far as Facebook, people like to vent on Facebook. And I don't think to chastise them on what our beliefs are. I think it's good. Thank you.
Additional public comments? Let me just note that I never once chastised people for opinions. I simply said it would be more productive if they called to articulate a complaint so that we can rectify the situation. Additionally, I have never been provided with any information that accepting sludge in any way contributes to the odor at our wastewater treatment plant. If someone would like to present me with information that proves that, I'm happy to take a look at it and act accordingly. If there's nothing further this evening, we've already excused the absence of Councilmember Roth, and the chair would entertain a motion to adjourn at 8:48 PM.
So moved?
Thank you, Councilmember Gearbaugh. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilwoman Dillon. All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. This meeting is adjourned.
Yeah, I know.